Good morning and welcome to Connie and Barry's Bordeaux Unpicked podcast. It's a very lovely sunny morning. Spring is fully here. It would have been nice to have had some of this weather maybe through the 24 growing season, but we're underway with Bordeaux en Primeur as a campaign now, and I'm joined with Mr. Eccles.
Hello.
Mr. Hargrave.
Good morning, Joe.
And Guy, who heads up the buying.
Hello.
A little bit of a quartet going on, slightly different to the previous Burgundy quartets and slightly different to the Bordeaux trio we've had. So hopefully you will enjoy. So let's just jump straight in. We are up and running with Bordeaux as a campaign. It sort of came out with the starter pistol firing last week, as we said in our email with Pontet Canet. I think let's address what's come out first of all, what we think about them, and then just some general other musings that we've been talking about amongst the team, amongst the sales floor with Bordeaux 24. So, Pontet Canet came out, and I think it's fair to say it's kind of certainly fallen on deaf ears. We weren't too enthusiastic about it. As a price, we haven't tasted the wine, so I think we should sort of, very quickly point out and reiterate with the way we're contacting our customers. We went out there as a team. We tasted a range that we could do within the time frame that we had. We did not want to stay over an extended period of time. We felt that we could get a good idea of the vintage and the character through a good sort of 2-3 days of negociant tastings and then 3 days of our relationships. We feel we achieved that, but it did mean that we didn't taste some of the wines that will be offered, such as Pontet Canet. When we've done that, we will be letting people know it's out and it's released, and we'll be letting them know we haven't tasted it, and we'll give them some thoughts on the price. It came out at £360 a six. It is certainly had some very positive reviews from various critics, which was nice to see, but the prices didn't make sense at all, and it was a real shame that being the first one out, it sort of fell in a price bracket where you could pretty much buy 19, 20, 15, 14 cheaper. Yeah.
Even 21, I think, in the market was
Yeah.
was cheaper than the than this release. I mean, it's we've been saying from the very beginning that we really feel that releases need to be the cheapest available physical vintage in the market, and it's the one metric that private customers or all customers have become used to doing when a wine comes out. When a wine's available, they'll go on to Wine Searcher and they'll have a look and see how does this price stack up against other available vintages. And the figures I'm looking at suggest that Pontet Canet was a 26% premium on the 2021 market price and 25% more expensive on the 2020. So I mean, at that metric, by that standard, nobody's going to be buying Pontet Canet. Having said that, I think we have heard from people in Bordeaux that they have sold a bit of Pontet Canet. So clearly there are followers of the estate out there who will want to continue that collection. But I find it quite hard to get on board with.
Yeah, I think the disappointment originally was there for me because this is the curtain is rising, and you get the opportunity to set the stall as a region, and it feels that this possibly hasn't been done at all, because when we were out there chatting to chateau owners, technical directors, negociants, managers, generally speaking, everyone was singing from a similar hymn sheet of, there is challenges to be had with the vintage, and there's some joyful wines that have been made in 24, and there's no doubt about that. But it was about how they get it into the market, how they price it correctly, and to position it so they can get some traction. And unfortunately, it just feels like this one wasn't that one to do, which is a shame.
Yeah.
A little shout out for a value one that did seem to be quite nice and pleasant with its pricing was Holiday. That came out at 126, joyful little wine, and well done guys. So this week has seen a bigger name come out, which has been far more encouraging. Lafite, that Domaine Lafite Rothschilds Domaine Baron Rothschilds, DBR, has come out with their stable, and yeah, brilliantly encouraging at a really, really exciting price. 855 for case of 3 is what we're selling at, and ultimately what that translates is to you as the customer is 15% below any other vintage of Lafite in the market. So this was what we were really sort of hoping for more of. We hope this may reorientate the direction of the campaign, make other people think about what they're going to do. But yeah, any thoughts on how that's gone?
Well, I think it's fair to say we were and this might be greedy, we were hoping for even more.
We were, yeah.
But we do think that, and why do we say that? Well, because we were really hoping that Lafite, which does lead and has done so for a number of years now, was going to pick a price that really set the whole market on fire in terms of saying this is what you've really got to do. They have come up with a very good price for their own wine. There's no doubt about that. People who bought it, people who are umming and ahhing, look, it's a good wine to buy. It was I think along with Margot, it was our pick of the first growths.
Yeah.
Everything correct. But we were hoping maybe that it would spark people into a sort of slightly different gear change, because you look back at someone like Pontet Canet who make a lot of wine, to not sell wine when you make a lot of wine obviously requires sort of deep pockets and things.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, this might be the first time that they've ever managed to buy Lafite because of the price that it's come out at, and it's going to be, it's going to be an early drinker. They could be approaching this wine in 10 years' time, and to have Lafite 24 as your first growth, or sort of first growth from the 2020s that you're going to approach. Pretty nice wine to get stuck into. So
Yeah,
price.
and I think that's, to pick up on what you said as well. I think we liked it, and we certainly endorsed it because it was our favoured first growth. In fact, it's probably one of possibly our favourite left bank wine of the vintage. With our scores, it was certainly up there. We scored it 17 to 17.5. We were unanimously, those who tasted it were very fond of it. So you've got quality there, and then this pricing coming out. I agree with you. We were hoping for lower. I think it could have been an absolute barnstormer of a win if they'd have gone lower, because I do know from talking to across the trade, like us, other merchants have done pretty well on it. We have sold it through it relatively quickly. We still have some, so do get in touch if you're listening to this and haven't. And you're sort of still thinking on decisions on what you want to buy, but there's a couple who have haven't really had too much joy with it.
Worth giving a shout out to Carrawad as well, the second wine, which was genuinely very very enticing in 24. It's not generally a vintage to buy many second wines, I would say, but I think I would make an exception for Carrawad. It was good wine, and we, as part of the stable of releases, the Duhat Milan wines also came out, and possibly less compelling from a price perspective, but the white in particular from Duhat I thought was charming. It was lovely.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that white. I mean, I was quite fond of it. I thought it had a really nice textural peel. It's going to be an early drinker, but there was a zip about it, and there was a sort of a nice vivacity that sometimes I just don't tend to find pulling back on whites. Yeah.
Just picking up on the scores that you mentioned there, because you scored it 17.5. I had an email back from a customer yesterday just saying you've not scored it very highly. Do you want?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. I mean, I think we see our scores as being realistic arbiters of quality within the context of a whole run of vintages, and I think I see anything above 16.5 this year being really rather enthusiastic. I mean, I think when you put it alongside a 22 or a 23, they're not going to have the same density and concentration and longevity. And, it's a very different style of wine, which is not to say that there aren't some really enticing 24s. But I think if you did a lineup of the last 10 years, it would be wrong to be scoring 24 at the same heady heights as we've been handing out to wines from 20, 22 and 23.
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% endorse that. I think also we want to use the scale to actually say something. I think it's very easy to get into a sort of score inflation, and that's a whole another podcast of its own. But we want, that there were maybe less than a handful of wines that had an 18 in them, or a 17.5 to 18. Whereas there are vintages where we do use the 19 and the 19.5. So I think it's really just in trying to guide. I guess maybe that was a rare outbreak of integrity from a wine merchant. I don't know. I'm jesting, but I think it's important that we use that. I think it's great we tasted well at Lafite, because we actually went to the wrong place when we tasted. We were behind the scenes is always important with these things, and we were very confident. Left the hotel, thought, right, great, we've got plenty of time. Got to Lafite 5 minutes early, only to then realise that between the six of us, we hadn't actually read that we were supposed to be tasting the wines at Duhat Milan. So Mr. Muller then sped some gravel all over the vineyard while we sped back down the Medoc to Duhat. But yeah, it was good tasting.
We can confirm that there's a lot of building work going on at Lafite. So,
Yeah.
in due course, that will be quite exciting, I
Yeah.
think.
A little tour of a construction site, you know.
Not like you getting lost in the middle.
Oh, here he is. Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
Piper. Yeah, there we go.
More attention to the playlist than the instructions.
You
It's very
turn
important.
left to
You've
Bordeaux
skipped
City.
past Brenaire, but anyway, Mr. Seddon, you had something, I think.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say before we get off the subject of scoring, it's just worth pointing out sort of the way we do it, because it's not sort of one person score goes. We do have a conversation after tasting each estate, and we'll do a little bit of benchmarking of what the rest of the tasting crew think. So it is our consolidated view as a team rather than one person's point of view.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, look, I would like to delve in because I've got another question on the scoring, but we'll circle back to that. One of your favourite sayings.
Yes.
Yeah, Brenaire came out. And
Yeah, I really felt for it. I mean, the Marantou, I think he's now head of the UGC and things, so maybe felt it was good to get out early. And I mean, it's the one I bought 2001 of it for my son because that was his vintage. I like the estate. I think talking to Max and Mark, who do our sort of negotiable buying, they've suggested people in Bordeaux are sort of saying that the price was good, but that people just didn't really buy it because I think it's in a ranking or whatever. It's in a clump of wines, horrible phrase, that are going to be around that price, and that actually it's a buyer's market for those. People are going to circle back, Joseph, to look at which wines they might buy, and it's the kind of thing. Actually, I think I tasted it well, and may well go back and buy some magnums or 6 bottles to support the estate, but there's going to be a lot of wines in that bracket, so it's sort of opposite of what we like commercially to say, but there's no real rush at that level.
I agree with that. I think it's a wine and an estate and a team which I have a lot of affection for. I think they're making very good wines, but it's £26.50 average UK selling price. And at that level, I think that you get to the threshold where people are thinking, is it worth buying this now? Or shall I just pick it up in the future for immediate drinking? And I think this is a tendency that we will see in years to come. And 24 is possibly a watershed moment for that some wines, frankly, don't make sense to buy en primeur. And, I think it's a great opportunity for wines to show their wares and to make inroads into selling a vintage through, but frankly, with the cost of storage and the cost of insurance and the tying up cash, which is no longer free, as we know, arguably it just doesn't really make sense below a certain price level.
Yeah, no. I think it'll be quite an interesting analysis pod at the end of the campaign, but we've got plenty of weeks of fun and games until that comes around.
I think it'll be interesting to see what everybody else does in Saint Julien. There's out of all of those in Saint Julien, you've got Bechevel, Level Barton, Langoa, De Croo, Gloria, everyone like that. And this could end up being sort of the starting gun that means that maybe to get a class growth from Saint Julien, you're probably only going to get Langoa cheaper.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the Saint Julien theme, and an honourable mention, Gruard, came out, and actually, again, they got a pricing really quite nice in its positioning. It's £258 for 6 bottles, which again materialised as the cheapest, pretty much within the market. When you look at the other sort of, in inverted commas, lesser vintages, the 13s, 17s, the 21s, but even less than 19s and 23s.
You get a nice fancy wax capsule now as well.
I do actually quite like that wax capsule.
Yeah.
I'm a bit
of there as well.
I'm a bit of a sucker for a wax capsule. Yeah, I've been pulled into the marketing maelstrom of it.
What are your thoughts on wax capsule?
I just think it's a bit weird with Bordeaux, only not because people don't really necessarily see the bottles as soon as, but on shelves and things it works. I mean, look, if you feel it's something that you can set up, and ultimately if you're a big enough producer, it probably works out no more expensive. But I mean, it's a sideline. I was just sort of,
I do want that rubberized wax though.
Oh, you don't want the stuff.
You don't want it going all over the kitchen. No, that's true.
There we go. I thought that he was going to come out with that first and have a strong opinion, but he sat on the fence.
Chris O'Hargrove.
But yeah, linking it back, maybe that move has encouraged Gruard to have dropped theirs a little bit lower, and we'll see what comes from it and move forward into that drinking level.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where we're at. I mean, Angelus today is the big name, and, within very quickly going back to what I was saying, when we're communicating about our mailings on Primeur and our releases, you would have seen an email come out where we attached and had a link to the wines we were recommended, and it's got a recommended fair price guideline in there where, again, as last year, we think what the wine should come out at, and obviously Lafite fell comfortably and handsomely into that, as did Gruard and Rose. Angelus just falls into it at the top end, but our gut feeling, we hadn't tasted it, so we're not getting too enthusiastic about it. It's an estate with a certain style and certain reputation. So for us, I think they probably needed to push the boundaries a little bit more in winning some other drinkers and Bordeaux fans to their cause. I don't think it's going to go particularly well. I don't know. What were your thoughts on the release?
Hard to say without having tasted it. I mean, I think the last couple of times I've tasted at Angelus, I have been very impressed with the quality of the wine. They're clearly making very high caliber wines, but there is a certain baggage that goes with the reputation, I think, in the UK, which may or may not be deserved. And in order to win the public round, to start voting with their wallets, I feel that they're not quite there yet in terms of image for some reason. But they've done everything that they could do, I think, in this vintage. So kudos to them in that sense. But I don't expect that we will be selling a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's now we've been discussing that a lot of these price points will mean that certain wines may be sort of mulled over for longer because people are going to take time to make their decisions. But also, there's got to be a really compelling reason. I think it's either got to be quality or price, and so there's going to be comparisons. With Angelus, I can't help but think, and instantly, the conversation on the floor turned to, we had Edouard Moueix in on Monday. We were doing some masterclasses with him, tasting his 24s. Bel-Air-Monange, it just, for me, stood out when we tasted at Bel-Air-Monange. We did the whole range and had a wonderful lunch with Edouard and Christian and Stefan at the estate. But, at 530 for 6, this is where Bel-Air-Monange comes
half
from.
the price.
Yeah, and the quality is stunning.
Yeah.
Okay, it's you look, if you're looking at the true analytics of the pricing on Bel-Air-Monange, it's coming out at the sort of evens with the other vintages of equal quality, but it's there. And for me, I'd be sort of steering my purse that way.
Yeah, you've got to go back and think that Angelus has been Angelus for a long time. Bel-Air-Monange, first vintage 08, first vintage that they incorporated Magdalene and didn't make Magdalene was 12. So you're only 10 years really into what has been a pretty meteoric rise at Bel Air. And I mean, so Angelus was 1070, did we say?
Angelus was, yes,
1070. So you buy
just
6 bottles and 3 magnums. But Bel-Air-Monange is exactly the same price.
Yeah.
And loyalties and all of that aside, that's where I would be with that. I mean, I really would.
Yeah, I mean, and it made me reread my tasting note this morning of Bel-Air-Monange just to, after a lovely 3 sessions with Edouard as well. But, we all know the wine. There was genuine refinement within Bel-Air-Monange, and that's something that we've discussed on the previous pods about 24, is wanting to get that sort of refinement coming through, and however that balance plays out. Ideally, we want some fruit and textural play amongst there because the structure's clearly on show. And I just loved it. And I said it was focused amongst a playful mindset. And I haven't tasted Angelus, so I can't do a direct comparison. But what I do know is that wine is going to be singing.
Yeah, wonderful one. Go on.
Yeah, and I was going to say, well, should we talk about the masterclasses? Yeah, we've, I think one of the few merchants, I know actually someone had another Bordelais over recently, but we had Edouard Moueix come over and present 2024s over 3 different tastings on Monday. And then yesterday we had Francois Micheville come over to do Tetre Boeuf, Roc de Com, Domaine de Com, and L'Orage.
And we were also going to have Peter Sissek, but unfortunately, when the whole Iberian Peninsula had a power cut, he couldn't make it over, much as he'd love to. But we did show the wine.
Yeah,
But we can probably
Teenage Hackers. Teenage Hackers Brevet.
As soon as the Spanish say it's definitely not cyber whatever it is. So I think we can come back. Yeah, exactly. We can. Yeah, the rest is wine politics. No, we can come back to Rochon another time. But yeah, it was great to have. I mean, Edouard and Francois couldn't be 2 more different characters, and have different approaches, and I think that's what makes it so exciting to work with them. And Edouard did to do 3 sessions in the same day, all about an hour and a half each, without sort of forgetting where he'd got to and things was some achievement. But it was brilliant tasting.
Well, let's talk about Moueix for a little bit then, because that offer is very much live with us now. So please do get in touch with any interest in your orders. And, you know, you want to kick the ball rolling? What's, from the range, what was your favourites from 24?
Well, we've spoken about Belle Ménage already, so I won't labour that point other than to say that I totally agree. And I mean, I think that plateau of Saint-Emilion has done a sterling job in 24. They've really produced some lovely wines. In terms of other bits and pieces, I think that the entry level was showing particularly strongly, and it must be recognized that these are fast developing wines. And, we tasted them 2.5-3 weeks ago in Bordeaux, and then again this week. And there has been some change even in the samples that we've tasted. So, it has to be said that these are fast developing personality wise and will really benefit from their time in barrel. Pays Mouton is a wine in Saint-Emilion, which I think deserves real mention. It comes from the other half, if you like, of the La Roque estate, and it's really become a replacement for Barry du Blanc, which we refer to as Barry White in house. That was our go-to Saint-Emilion for many years, even decades, and for one reason and another is now sort of beginning a bit of a descent into, I don't know if obscurity is the right word, but there's a generational change happening there. Pays Mouton is really sort of stepping in to fill its shoes, and I think there's no reason not to include that with every order of your Moueix wines. It's £125 for a case of 12, so that's a bit of
It's unbelievable value, yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I mean, I got criticised heavily by my northern friend here, Mr. Eccles, for suggesting there was a wine to buy in halves last year. I can't remember what the wine was, but he thought I was gone very strange.
Well,
Pays Mouton in magnums, I mean, what could be more fun for 3-4 years' time? You got friends around for Barbie or whatever, and I mean, it's just a cracking.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I saw after the tastings, orders have come in. The first order I saw came in had 10 cases of Pays Mouton on it. I was just like, spot on. That is exactly that thinking, and that's for 125 a dozen. That's the way to go.
Yeah, I love Pays Mouton. It was, opening all the wines and tasting them. Pays Mouton was just joyous already. Like when it gets delivered, have it delivered at home and enjoy it. And also a big moment for me, Never Been Called a Friend by Will Hargrove. So
can we edit? Yeah,
we'll edit.
Can we dub it?
Yeah,
it's
we'll make mistakes.
Yeah,
but yeah,
usually
drinking 26 to 30 from Mr. Brett Smith's note there, and I think that's spot on. But I mean, moving on, we move to another P with the plants. Although I don't know whether we want to do Saint-Emilion first and then go back over. We can do whichever way. But I had some real favourites. I can't remember if we finished your favourites, Guy. But no,
crack on.
Well, no, I mean, I thought La Serre, which we don't always buy, I thought was really good, juicy. Plants, which we were just about to mention. So those are two that we've ebbed and flowed on, and it's interesting that we include them in the vintage that people think maybe is a lesser vintage. And actually, we actively asked for an offer on both of those. And then I thought, I mean, I'm a massive Latour Pomerol and Clos Saint-Martin fan. Couldn't be more different. Obviously different communes, but just couldn't be more different in style. But I think they're both absolutely brilliant. And I mean, to be offering Latour Pomerol at under £300 a six, I think is pretty staggering. We've shown 17 and things like that recently, which is maybe on a par, and it's just an absolute joy.
There's a stunning purity to Latour Pomerol in 24. It's not going to be the most high octane, dense, concentrated vintage, but it's just so pure. There's a crystalline kind of purity about it, which is very impressive. Clos Saint-Martin as well, as you said, very different style. But I mean, Clos Saint-Martin, 50% fermented in amphora, and that really gives this kind of sheen and shine and brightness to the fruit. It's a very easy wine to love at any stage of its life. And I think of all of the wines at the tasting, people stuck their nose into Clos Saint-Martin and said, "Oh yeah, that's really quite special."
Yeah, it's suave, isn't it? It sort of just wraps you up in a bit of cashmere or something. And it's so small. And Sophie does a brilliant job there. But not even 1.5 hectares. I mean, boring to make sort of Bordeaux Burgundy comparisons, but that's even. It's not a big holding in Burgundy, let alone Bordeaux.
It was my first visit there actually to the estate.
Was it really?
Yeah, Clos Saint-Martin, and I really loved it because you've just got this almost farmhouse feel to some of the rooms, the way they're laid out. You've got some of the wood beams coming through, there's whitewash walls, you've got the winery, then it's got the amphora inside. You can see that it's all on a really small scale. Obviously, the vineyard just outside the doors. And I loved it. And I think actually it really shows you what Santamilian Grand Cru is all about. And it's just got that real presence of its limestone richness within the wines, which gives that brightness. And I think, the amphora helps sort of really elevate that within the wine. And totally agree with your Soif comment. There's this really lovely sort of finesse about Clos Saint-Martin that comes through, and certainly came through in 24 for me, more than it did when I tasted 23 sample here. So I mean, not that the 23 is a lesser wine, but again, stylistically, thinking about 24s, you've got to think differently. And I had this when we did Rocheron, and I know I mentioned this briefly on the last pod when we had 24 next to 23. Peter was brave to show 23 next to 24. But at the moment, 24 was the one that was singing with shining transparency, with this sort of saline limestone character. What you want from Santamilian. And I feel that Santamilian is a real winner in 24 as a commune, personally. I think there's a bit of consistency that shows there. And I think time will show that actually this is a great Santamilian vintage in context of the overall quality of what 24 brings.
Largest commune in France, I think it's right. I think I'm right.
Really?
Santamilian.
So because I mean, I normally get far more inconsistent tasting notes on there. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's a 6 case order with Moueix. There's three Santamilian, there's 3 Pomerol. It would be Pays Mouton, Santamilian, it'd be Clos Saint-Martin, it'd be Bellon Menage. It would then be Le Fleur Gazan within Pomerol. I really liked it because there's quite a serious side to Le Fleur Gazan this year. There's some quite obvious structure which the vintage has given, but it has been managed and brought well with already with its oak treatment. It felt that it was brought into a good place and a good shape.
And it's one of the most apt names, because I think people often think that the names, particularly in Pomerol, can be quite marketing orientated.
Yeah.
But it literally sits between La Fleur and Gazan. It doesn't quite, which I'm sure if you were sort of running it, you'd try and squeeze into the marketing somewhere. It doesn't quite actually abut Petrus itself, which obviously Gazan and La Fleur both do.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's in a cracking side.
Yeah. Well, this is it. The Pomerol Plateau is all about it, isn't it? And I mean, I'd have to say Latour Pomerol. That was gorgeous, because where you've got a bit more of a serious side and broad-shouldered approach with La Fleur Gazan, obviously a slightly different price point. Latour Pomerol has that more flirtatious appeal to it as well, and with age, it's going to be very. It's going to be very sort of. I think slightly sexy for 24. And then, probably the Fleur Petrus. So that would be if that's where I was going. Again, that takes the Pomerol side to a little bit more of a classical origin. Again, I think in 24 with the Fleur Petrus. So those would be my mine.
So I assume you'd be expecting an allocation of Trossinois after that, would you?
Well, of course I would. Yeah, I mean, Troy is my favourite.
And it's really interesting that, and we must actually. This is Edouard Moueix has done something we've been asking for a little while, and I think he's been quite. He's released all his wines. He's led from that. There's been a couple in the last few vintages. He's tended to release most, then hold back the sort of the 3-letter wines, if you like: CSM, CDM, BM, LAP, and LFP. So you can work those all out, and that's a bit of homework for everyone. But he's tended to split it, and Trop coming later. I think actually we've got the Trossinois price, and was just talking to marketing team earlier. I think we'll be trying to get that out in May. There's no point hanging around. We've often done it in July because the campaign's gone on. But let's do what Edouard's done, which he very subtly and gently suggested we should do, and get on with it. So I think we will.
To be fair, which is what we're saying to them as well about the whole campaign.
Yeah.
Mr. Eccles, what about you? I mean, that was your first dive into the
it showed 2024 showed that the best appellations can do well. Santamilian, you're on limestone, it's free draining. Pomerol, you're on clay, it absorbs all the water, and you're all free in the soil. And then the sandy, gravelly soils are the ones where you're going to have issues in 2024 because they hold water. You have some rot. So, I picked 4. My across sort of Santamilian and Pomerol for a couple of different reasons. My concentrated wines that I think were velvety and rich Clos Saint Martin,
Mm.
Saint-Emilion, and Le Fleur Petrus, to drink.
Yeah.
It's top Pomerol that you're drinking, really concentrated. And then on the other side of the scale that just shows the quality of the vintage, as in the terroir quality, are the elegant, chalky wines like Belle Monange was just top. There is a clear trajectory there, and you just see it again and again. Red fruit, concentration, elegance, perfume, and really chalky tannins. And then Bourgneuf, Pomerol.
Yep.
It's such good value.
Yeah.
Such good value.
Banded Trot.
Oh, God. That's a Yorkshire accent, mother. Please, can we stop it?
Yeah, no, good shout. Good shout.
Yeah. I think, well, before we move on to Moueix, again, just for consistency, looking at the prices, there's, some of these, the wines, we're sort of revisiting almost, in some cases, 13 and 11 release prices and 14 with Moueix. So they've made a real big effort, which is a real positive sign. Latour Pomerol starts with a 2 for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, no, exactly.
6. Le Fleur Petrus at 680 is 6. It's come down a lot. There's, there's occasional cases here and there on sort of 11s, 13s, 17s, rogue ones that you can see. And if you see them, all this is reconfirming the quality of 24 and where the pricing is. It's just reconfirming, pick those up if you see them and snap them.
And that's at the same time that they've not released 3 wines, so to which accentuates the effort they've made. The Grava Pomerol on the gravels that Aaran was talking about, Hosanna, which has quite a light soil, has quite a thin soil, so it floods too easily.
Yeah,
actually, they didn't make 13, they didn't make 02 there from memory. And then what was the other one that didn't release? Lagrange.
Yeah.
So similar. Lagrange was a different reason it got hit by. I think got hit by some hail. But to have 3 wines you've not made is not an insignificant scenario in a vintage, even for a family as sort of well rooted in it all as Moueix. So to do that and then to bring your prices in line with where we feel they should be is some effort.
Yeah, no, indeed. I think their approach is great. It's commendable, and it's the lunch itself. It's honest, good fun conversation with people that we've I love seeing because I'm seeing Adam and you will you know these guys for over 2 decades. Guy and I are scratching up some time here, but it's lovely to see how the relationships and the rapport, and especially when you throw the chairman in the mix as well, it's great, and you see that candor, you see that strength of relationship, and everything they've been telling us, they've been following up, and I think the signs are positive for Moueix with 24. So the thing I wanted to circle back to is sort of we spoke about the scores, and let's address, there's some critics now who have come out with their reports, and we've got another big one. I think, Neil Martin, I think it's coming out on the 7th or 8th of May, something like that.
No, it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yes. Sorry, not
which will be the
1st. And,
Mayday.
Mayday. We've been discussing in-house, and there's definitely some very overzealous writing from my point of view in terms of how, one particular critic has gone very enthusiastic on 24. But I thought it'd just be fun to talk about, it's a slight mixed bag and mixed messages here. I mean, we feel that we've come back, as if you listen to this podcast already, with total, open, honest feedback, reviews, and assessment. And there are some good wines made in 24, but by no means do we think this is a superb vintage. So I don't have any comments because, we've got 2 critics who are throwing around quite heavy scores, one which is definitely reining it back a bit more. And
I think it's interesting. I think the idea that you can score a vintage or rank a vintage is becoming less and less relevant. I think you can probably put, if you were to take the last 15 vintages for Bordeaux, let's say, and put them in, you could probably put them into sort of A, B, and C or whatever if you wanted to in quality, but it's becoming harder and harder. I mean, you get hot vintages, I prefer 17 to 18 in a way. I think, whereas I'm sure in 20 years' time I might feel differently. But I think it has to be done wine by wine. So I don't necessarily understand when you get a sort of an en masse inflation, and it's, someone's report, you're into them scoring the wines sort of 88 or 89 to 91 when they've only gone down 30 or 40 wines, which I think is quite an honest way to do it. So I'm sort of in ranking, I'm talking, and then we've got a critic out yesterday, and the first 100 wines they score, you're still in the 92 to 94, 91 to 93. Now, I like optimism, and we're wine merchants, we like selling wine. But I think you have to question it. You have to question it slightly as to whether people are scoring it in the context of a vintage, in which case scores of 92, 94, 95 in 24. If you're saying that it is a 3.5 or 4-star vintage out of 5, that's one thing. But if you're trying to sort of score it in absolutes, exactly as Guy says, that's why 17 to 17.5 is a strong performance in 2024, when you could go back to 22 or 19 and see that a lot of wines got 17 to 17.5. So I think it must be confusing. And I think the fact of the matter is there are so many more people launching reports now. Let's be blunt. We've never used them, but let's be blunt. 15 years ago, everyone waited for Robert Parker and maybe took into account a few others because they started to realize that his style may not be their style. It's not a criticism. It's just one of those things. Now, there are so many people out there putting reports out there, and there's no dominant force. In a way, a good thing. Wine merchants have their role to play as well. But I just feel it's got a bit muddied, and are people chasing, a journalist chasing followers by scoring wines highly, in which case I don't think they're necessarily doing them the favours that they could be supposed to be.
I would agree that it's a good thing that there's no one dominant voice anymore. I think the fact that you've got a range of different styles and palettes, and you can find a critic as a wine lover and follow their recommendations. That's the sort of good thing to say for a range of voices. The negative, of course, is that you've got a whole load of ambitious journalists jockeying for position, and they want to become the dominant voice. They want to become the new Parker, maybe. And I think that does a disservice to wine buyers, wine lovers, who just want a bit of impartiality. And there's got to be something crazy about a wine merchant like us scoring wines lower than supposedly impartial critics. We can't be accused of not being partial. Of course, we're partial. We have certain commercial relationships, and we have to sell wine. But even so, even within those parameters, we're trying our best to give the most balanced view possible. Whereas it seems to me that certain journalists who should be 100% impartial are giving quite perplexing signals by scoring wines very highly in places.
Yeah. And, an example we touched on previously about this is a vintage where a lot of those who have money can merely make a great wine because of various factors. And I don't know, let's take Cheval Blanc, for example, where they use the density bath, which is the sort of the hot equipment chat of 24. And they made a beautiful wine. But, in all genuine honesty, it is a lovely wine, but it's certainly not as good as their 22 and other vintages. And yet, with these scores, people are implying that these are, knocking the socks off or competing, like you said, with that. And it's just, those mixed messages is a tough one.
I think if you're going to score wines within the context of the vintage, that's fine, but you must make that crystal clear. You must say these scores are being given in the context of a vintage which is rated, as you said, maybe 3.5 out of 5 or something. And you've got to make that very clear. You've got to actually score the vintage in itself and then give scores within that context.
But it has changed recently, and I think that the 100-point scale is a little bit broken. It changed, maybe 5 or 6 years ago that sort of scores of 89 then became 93 as just a norm. And now I can feel for journalists that I think if they give a wine in the 80s, then they probably won't be welcome back to taste again because it's just not very nice. Therefore, with thinking that it's broken, every wine is basically going to be in the 90s. So just remove the 9 and then score it out of 10 from what they've given it. So 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
And that will probably give you a more realistic view on how the vintage is, because I can understand that journalists have to keep relationships as well. But yeah, a score in this vintage of 95 just doesn't compare to 95 in a.
But it's interesting that it's done so much. It's interesting it's done so much in wine. I'm sure lots of other hobbies that people have got there. You get critical review, but you don't really get an absolute score. You get a conclusion or whatever. And the devil's always in the detail in terms of reading notes. But I guess it's at a speedy time of year like Entrepreneur used to be. You need a number. But it is a bit depressing.
The sad thing is people look at the number and they don't read the note.
Yes.
So, if you look at some of these supposedly inflated scores and you read the actual notes, the notes are by and large quite reasonable. But I think the number is what people focus on.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to the release of your wine sensei and his scores, Mr. Suckling, Aaron.
And out of 10.
See how many 100 points are smashed out of the park. So look, I think we'll wind down on this one, and we'll be back next week once we've had a little bit more activity, because I don't think there'll be anything else. So
and we can come back to Mitchellville, which we'll talk a bit more about once they come out, or once they be.
Indeed.
We think they're going to be the 12th of May, which is probably going to be the middle of the campaign, we hope.
Yeah, indeed.
We'll see.
Well, lovely. Thanks very much for your time, gents. And we'll reconvene next week.
Always
Thanks,
a
Joe.
pleasure.
Cheers.